Nice to see so many of you here today. We are delighted to welcome you this afternoon or this morning, whatever applies to your time zone. We cannot start without first giving thanks to our dear board members and many of our schools, our centers, funders, legislators, and friends who are here today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tracy Greenwich. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Director of Development at Cool Culture. We are very excited to welcome you to our inaugural Culture Chat. Joining me today and doubling as our technical guru is Sheldon Fisher, our fantastic development manager. You can review, thanks Sheldon, you can review the chat for today's logistics. And just so you know, this webinar will be recorded and sent out to our attendees. And we also have closed captioning. There is a Q&A feature at the bottom left-hand section of the screen. And 45 minutes into the conversation, Sheldon would relay any questions that you have to the panel. If you are joining us for the first time, just to give you a little bit of information about who we are, we have been around for about 20 years. We were envisioned by two trailblazing early childhood educators, Edwina Mears and Gail Velez, who wanted to ensure that historically marginalized communities could freely access cultural resources across the city. Today, we continue to carry this torch and use the arts to create an equitable society that values and embraces and is enriched by all cultures. We are truly very committed to providing an environment where people from all walks of life can collaborate to create and reimagine a society that understands shared humanity. We see the possibilities in our work that is achieved when arts and culture is used as a vehicle to transport people, to transcend cultures, and to bring us all together from various walks of life to make traction around common goals. Through our flagship program and all the other programs that support that initiative, we do work with 450 schools each year. And these schools focus on early childhood education, 90 wonderful cultural institutions, and this includes zoos and botanic gardens, and 50,000 families that sign up for our programs. During the pandemic, we launched our first health and well-being initiative called We Are a Work of Art. And we use this to respond to our families and our communities in need. Now, we are a small BIPOC-led organization and we have big dreams, but we could not achieve these dreams without our collaborators, many of who are on this call. And we are delighted that you are here to join with us and to learn more about how we achieve our goals. And if you haven't partnered with us before, we hope that this conversation does inspire you to join us. So I am happy to get us all started. We had a little delay in the time, so I'm just going to jump into introducing our esteemed panel and our moderator, who is our Executive Director, Candice Anderson. Candice has devoted her career to advancing cultural equity, racial and social justice for BIPOC communities, and she has a wealth of experience in early childhood education policy. On our panel this afternoon is Ran Yan, the Executive Director of Lewis Latimer House Museum. The Latimer House Museum is one of our partnering institutions, and Ran welcomes diverse audiences to programs at the museum that are rooted in African American inventor and humanist Lewis H. Latimer's legacy. We are so happy to have you join us this afternoon, Ran. And also joining us is Maggie Nunez, founder and owner of Sunny Skies Preschool. Sunny Skies have been partnering with Cool Culture for many years. Maggie is an educator, an activist, mother, and caregiver that hails from Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, and she lives in New York City. Maggie, we are so happy to have you and Ran join us this afternoon. Candice, over to you to kick us off.
Great, thank you, Tracy. And Maggie, are you able to start your video?
Yes.
Okay, great. So
Hello.
good to see you. Thank you, Tracy, Maggie, and Ran. As longtime partners, I'm really excited to be in community and conversation with you both and with our audience. All of us are bearing witness to rapid societal shifts that are taking place over the past few years, stemming from the ongoing and incredibly destabilizing impacts of the pandemic and a continued onslaught of devastating acts of racialized violence, and the ongoing and renewed calls for equity and change by BIPOC folks and their allies. And as individuals who are both part of and committed to BIPOC communities and to cross-cultural solidarity, we, along with many members of our audience, have been focused on efforts to respond to the really multi-layered effects of these dynamics. At Cool Culture, Tracy mentioned, we launched our We Are a Work of Art campaign, and we worked with both of you and other museum and early childhood education partners. Together, we assembled a network of BIPOC artists, of healers, and health practitioners who joined us in dialogue with families. And that dialogue was holistic. We centered mental, physical, spiritual, and civic well-being and health. This campaign offered families toolkits on these aspects of wellness and included one toolkit specific to Lewis Latimer House and other resources that support well-being. And I think all of us are proud that the resources were grounded in line with our values in ancestral and indigenous practices of our communities. And of course, we're thinking about reducing isolation. So we came together at first online and then in person at museums, cultural centers, early childhood centers to harness the arts to support healing. And look, for many of us, we have been and continue to be in rapid response mode. So I'm really glad that we're able to create a space today to reflect on what families are experiencing. A lot of the impacts have been quite hard, but frankly, also pleased to be able to take a moment to bring visibility to the really rich and innovative solutions that are coming out of our neighborhoods and communities in the spirit of mutual aid and that lean on arts and culture. So welcome again to you both. And why don't we start by setting the stage, talking a little bit about our communities and what we're observing. So I want to start with Ran at Lewis Latimer House. You're located in Flushing, Queens. And for those who have not visited Lewis Latimer House, it's very much should be at the top of their list. I want to note it's really a perfect venue for families as an intimate space, as a space that's actually a home itself, right? So the parallels between art objects in the home, in one's own home, and the history and objects in Lewis Latimer are well made by your skilled staff. And so why don't I have you tell us, I'll step back and have you tell us about the historic house, the neighborhood, its surrounding areas, as well as how you think about the broader community of visitors you're building relationships with.
Thank you, Candice. So like you said, Lewis Latimer House is an intimate setting. The house itself is a moderate 2.5-story Victorian home, very typical of the historic houses you see all across New England from the 19th, 20th century. And Latimer and his family lived there for 26 years. It was the only house they owned. So we try to really embrace that as a welcoming space for the folks in the community to come together. Flushing as a neighborhood went through many changes over years. Today, it is a community with a majority Chinese immigrant community and other parts, other really diverse populations from Korea and a lot of Spanish-speaking communities as well, surrounding the outer parts of Flushing and Corona Meadow Park. So we really try to embrace that and also highlight the part of history of Flushing that today's people, when you come to Flushing, you might not really notice. In the past, Flushing had a great history of religious freedom. It welcomed the Quakers and people like Louis Latimer to build homes there. So we offer really programs in different languages. We have bilingual docents on site during all our open hours to engage visitors in the neighborhood who were walking by to learn about Louis Latimer.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your bringing forward the uniqueness of that community and welcoming a Black scientist, right, as a homeowner, and then moving forward to today, the really richness of cultures that are coming together in Flushing and Corona. And Maggie, if I could ask you to speak a little bit about Sunny Skies. The preschool is in Prospect Heights. You are the founder, and I know you started this early childhood program with a strong vision for children and for families of all backgrounds. It's really a model, I have to say, for individuals interested in a space that honors families and that is arts infused and social justice, early childhood education infused. Many people are not necessarily clear about the connection between young children and social justice. And you certainly have that at the core of your work. So give us a little bit of background about the community you're located in and that you've built for families.
Hi, thank you for the invite. I'm honored to be here. I hope you can hear me. I can't hear very well. Sunny Skies came about as my childhood dream. As I grew up in impoverished Dominican Republic with very, very little resources and very little opportunities to just go anywhere. My mother didn't have money. And when I grew up, I decided I wanted to change that for my generation, for my own children. I wanted my children to go to a good preschool, and I looked around and I didn't see any good preschools that met my criteria. So I made a preschool, and the same things I wish and hope for my own children are my wishes and hopes for all the children, not just my students, but in the city in general. And that's why I work with Cool Culture, because I see the benefit of it. Going to the museum, and it's still, not so expensive, but people in a budget in New York City having to raise children, pay the high rents, buy the food, and provide clothing and other necessities to their children, typically won't have $100 extra just to go to the museum. And I do notice that a lot of the institutions, that would be the price families would have to pay if they take all their children and themselves. So for a day out in a park, in a museum, in any other cultural space. And I think having Cool Culture, it should be almost mandatory for all children, because I see a huge difference in my children from before we get the cards, before October 31st, when we first get the cards, to January. They're using different language, they're behaving differently inside and outside. They come up with very interesting topics of conversation, and typically they include, I just saw such pretty dresses in the Brooklyn Museum, and I know they're talking about the Dior exhibit. And they say they went and they saw an old apartment, and I know what they're talking about because we teachers also visit these places, and it makes me so proud to know that the families take advantage of it. And my wish is to have the same impact in every single baby in the city of New York across the board.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for speaking to the work that we've been doing for many years as partners, right? Prior to the pandemic even, and also for bringing forward this notion that we believe deeply at Cool Culture that parents, adult caregivers are themselves activists, right? They're agents of change. And so when you're speaking about noticing what the community needed, what you wanted for your own family and it not being there, and then creating a center yourself, right? For you, your children, and members of community. I think that's an important reminder for us, right? So I want to shift a little bit to talk about what the two of you are observing in terms of the needs and the priorities of families with young children, and how they may have changed since the pandemic. And I like to really highlight that we're not just talking about needs, right? We're talking about priorities. We're talking about the ways that families have stepped in the spirit of mutual aid to assist one another. So Maggie, maybe I can start a little bit with you, to lay the landscape for what you've observed as an early childhood program in that context. Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. I'm sorry, I'm not technical. I know a lot about education, psychology, technology, zero. My take about the whole pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, early childhood observations are that families have shifted their needs from just needing care anywhere to being more savvy and more stringent about the environments that children will go into, the interactions that they'll have, and the services we provide. Families seem to favor centers that offer benefits, such as assistance applying for Child Health Plus on site, assistance signing them up for public school on site, and Cool Culture. It's a big part of people are over the years, people have become aware of the card, the red card they call it. So it's one of the things that we make sure to mention when we're touring families. And although we make no promise, we don't know if we'll get it again, but we tell them that we've learned how to guide families into the cultural institutions and how wonderful it is for children, and it is integrated in education. So parents have become very, very aware of emotional instruction, being in spaces that inspire their children. And before they were very focused on reading and writing, and I think the pandemic did this to all of us. You can read and write all you want. If you're not happy, none of that matters. And they're focusing on mental health for their children. They call it happiness, but in reality, it is mental health. When children thrive and play and meet with their friends outside the confines of the schools, that's taking care of their mental health. When they can get up on a Saturday and have 90 choices of where to go, it empowers them to take ownership of their community, of their daily life, of their activities. So families have become like a hub, as opposed to just unit where mommy and daddy say what's going to happen and the children follow. Children have gained a voice. And it's only for the positive.
And what you're talking about too, right, is increased conversation about mental health and the components of well-being, right? So a shift from reading and writing and a traditional type of school success, educational success, to one that's a bit more holistic, right? Given all the
Yeah.
impacts we've seen. And Rand, shifting to you, what are you seeing and how are you thinking about the role of Lewis Latimer, of art, of STEAM, of history and healing?
Was that for me? Oh.
In the STEAM educational programs we've been doing for both schools and families, we've definitely noticed some shift. I think in many ways the needs from the families are stronger than ever, especially we all know the pandemic exposed and exacerbated the gaps in different families' access to resources. And for some, there is a lot of catching up to do following the pandemic, in not just in academics or in in-person schooling, but also the social environment for the especially younger kids to acclimate or reacclimate to the world beyond their homes and their immediate families. And I think the changes are in many ways still shifting today, and it'll continue to be felt and evaluated for some time to come.
And how have you been thinking about your programming in light of that? What shifts may you have made? This is for both of you, but Rand, you can start us off.
Yeah, so for our programming particularly, we started by shifting online, and then we noticed that once we shifted online, the audience we were reaching also shifted. They were slightly different demographics from slightly different geographic locations as opposed to in-person events. And they also, to be honest, placed extra burdens on our team of educators and staff. We had to kind of adjust our programming design and structure to be more flexible to meet the really shifting needs from the families, because they are not just wanting to, get access to STEAM education, they're also juggling with different priorities in their own lives, like mental health, like Maggie mentioned. So there is really a lot of flexibility that we had to relearn to be comfortable with uncertainty and just to be better to meet the needs without the old thinking of this is the program we're offering, this is the time, this is what they'll get, just to be more open-minded in that aspect. And with Cool Cultures partnership, upon reopening the site, we started utilizing our outdoor space more. We have this small but really wonderful green space and garden on the ground of the museum. So we partner with some wellness themed festivals with Cool Culture, and that was really wonderful. And we've been more intentionally activating that outdoor space to tap into the healing nature of the healing power of nature. And we just saw a really strong need for the families to come outside and to be in each other's company in that way.
And so I'm noting that you're talking about these moments of stress, right, and moments of crisis and change as an opportunity to be in conversation with your community about how their needs may have changed. I really appreciate you're speaking to the historic inequities that you're seeing, and the kind of response that we all kind of spent time garnering, right, to be supportive in a community. And one of the implications is for your own team, right? So I wonder if you can speak a little bit about the preparations or work that you did amongst your own team to be in a position to support families better.
Yeah, and in my own team, we, each individual had like different comfort levels with the idea of different technologies and virtual versus in-person formats. And we kind of had to just like come to a space of kind of almost reconciliation amongst ourselves to see what we can do and to almost to like encourage each other to get more comfortable with the idea of this big change that we had never done before. And in terms of programming specifically, you know, we kind of changed the format a lot. We started doing individual office hours as opposed to like a virtual online class to a whole group of class at the same time. And we try to structure in social elements and for the students to interact with each other instead of just like facing a screen to listen to the instructor. So because we do some fun, hands-on fun coding or game making activities, so the kids like they competed against each other, they played with each other. Even during some virtual sessions we had so that they don't feel as isolated.
Yeah, two things that you mentioned really strike me. The first being the individualized support, right, for community partners. And that's, I think, a way of recognizing the extent to which a lot of BIPOC organizations are incredibly stretched, right? And so need additional support. And the second thing I'm noting is you're taking advantage of the entirety of your space at Lewis Latimer, in particular the green space, the possibilities for connecting with nature. And so, Maggie, I want to shift the conversation over to you and ask you similarly, how might you have shifted the ways in which you moved with families to take and identify opportunities that will support folks' mental health and well-being, physical health?
Well, for the communities as a whole, the introduction of the free pre-K and 3K program has done a host of wealth because now the children are not segregated in the preschool setting. The families are not segregated by social class or ethnicity. Now everybody goes with everybody. In my schools, I have children who are recent refugees from Ukraine, from Mexico, from all over the world, as well as children whose mommy is the district judge in Brooklyn. So having access to these new programs, these new social movement programs, has helped families a lot and making them aware of that very thing that's so important. If you want to have children who are global citizens, we have to raise them as global citizens. They have to be exposed to Basquiat, they have to know Monet, and they have to know people who look like them too. So we make them aware of that, and also they gain awareness of that by just living in New York and all the things that are happening here culturally. Our families really enjoy the company of each other. And they also make it a point to really connect with the teachers in the classroom, out of the classroom, and volunteering. So they get to know the neighborhood, the community, the people in the community, and it all becomes like a guide map for them for the next 12 years in the public school system.
Thank you. So I'm interested also in this theme of community, of opportunities to know one another better. We have different cultural histories. Our experiences within the United States context might be very different, but in so many ways, our common humanity spans across those differences. And I do want to give a nod and speak to the fact that the past several weeks have been very difficult, with recent acts of mass violence against the API community unfolding in Monterey Park, as we have witnessed state-sanctioned actors take the lives of yet another young Black man in Memphis, And both of these events recall the trauma of similar hate crimes against the Latinx community in El Paso and the LGBTQ plus community in Orlando. And the difficult reality is that children feel the impact of real world events and what is happening in the news. And while the impulse may be to excuse them from adult conversations, this really limits their ability to express what they are experiencing. I think all of us know that. And I'm wondering if you can speak to what some of the practices you use to help children process these experiences. I'm thinking, Ran, as well, about the communities that you're bringing together, the Chinese immigrant community, Korean community, Chinese American community, Black community, and this really wonderful opportunity that you have, right, to engage folks.
Yeah, in our schools, most of my students pre-pandemic were African American, Caribbean American, or Hispanic American. As of now, post-pandemic, and after the opening of the 3K for all, when it became really for all, it's a mix. However, all the children come to school with the same trauma, the same information, the same look. Sometimes when something happens that we hear in the news, we think they're not listening, but they are. They notice when we get upset about these things. And what we've created in the schools is we have quiet corner. And it's a corner that has elements of nature, cozy chair, stuffed farm animals that they can hug. They can sit with friends and conversate about whatever. And they also get an opportunity to tell us what they're thinking about in circle time. And I can tell you without shadow of a doubt that all these things you mentioned clearly affect children. They speak about it. They express how they feel about it. Our little African American and Black, all people of color in my schools express fear about their daddy, about their grandpa, about whoever they know that's an adult. And we have to always bring them back to the world where we're all one people, we're all united, and hope that by learning the mindfulness techniques, learning to be free to express themselves, and know that one bad person doesn't make all the people that look like that evil, go a long way in preparing them for a better world, or at least I hope it will be a better world for their sake. Things are happening today, such as anti-Semitism, anti-Asians, anti-Blacks, things that happen with government agencies, such as the police force, are really having a negative impact in the children's mental health, because we see it every day. And if they don't talk about it, we have art where even a psychologist can just take a picture from a child and tell you what they're thinking, what state of mind they are. And if you look at dated material from children's art, you will see what's happening in the world, if not in their world at home, in the world right outside the walls, just by looking at the pictures. So the more we cultivate a ability to express through art, the more information we'll get about how to help them. And it goes a long way in creating kinder, smarter, more positive, forward thinking communities. They'll have their entire lives to perfect the A's and to dot their I's and to cross their T's, their entire life. They'll be hopefully getting a doctorate in something huge like a brain surgeon or something, and they'll be in college for the next 27 years. They can learn all that there. But in preschool, there's certain parts of the brain that shut down once you turn 5 years old. And that has an effect on children, that whatever you put in there when they were 2, 3, 4, up until 5 will remain there for the rest of that life. So putting love, putting art, putting compassion, putting humanity, and you're gonna get that in return many times over.
And Ran, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for the same question.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, not just the recent incident you mentioned, Candice, you know, ever since the beginning or the onset of the pandemic, there have been a series of almost nonstop tensions and racial traumas, you know, the violence against the AAPI community and the killing of George Floyd. And we know that as a Black heritage site, the Lewis Latimer House is uniquely positioned in this Asian community to bring different cultures together and to be a place of healing and community building. So we really appreciate it when, you know, Cool Culture staff actually proactively reached out to us to discuss the collaborations for the Wellness Festival, and with the intention to foster Black Asian solidarity and to utilize our green space for community building. And they also give our team confidence in doing what we've been thinking about. So I think that is a wonderful collaboration, and it's really important to have a space, I think, like ours to do this type of community building, to bring our local residents together and to bring different communities and cultures together. And, you know, arts and culture play a really unique role in our well-being and maintaining a sense of community, and to foster our identity and connect our identity to the communities we belong to. So these connections are really critical to our mental health, no matter the age, especially for families and young children, I think. So, and for Latimer House especially, we also teach a piece of history that has been long overlooked, the story and legacy of Black inventor Lewis Latimer. And understanding history is really critical in helping us address these many challenges today, if not in the policy sense, at least in the sense of our mental well-being. It helps orient us at a time that can seem sometimes fracturing or isolating.
And I'm wondering, for those less familiar with your work, if you can talk a little bit about how you intentionally bring together communities across cultures. So you have this wonderful historical home, right, that is a tribute to Lewis Latimer. You have community members who are immigrants from China, from Korea, Spanish-speaking immigrants as well. So how do you cultivate community?
It begins with Latimer's story, but it doesn't stop there. So, you know, the foundations is interpreting this piece of history in the languages that those people, our communities speak, so that this history telling is continuing across cultures. And then beyond that, we build programs that kind of celebrate the broader achievements of BIPOC innovators and their contributions to American life in the lineage of Lewis Latimer. And for our family programs, especially, we teach STEAM education, since, you know, Latimer was not only an inventor, but also a poet and a painter who really championed the connection between science and arts. And that really brings families together. And when they come to the museum, they not only get to do fun STEAM educational activities, they also learn about Lewis Latimer and the important role he played. And that really, we believe, plants a seed in those children and families.
Yeah, absolutely. So that we can come together and learn from one another, right? And the extent to which our histories are overlapping, and in many cases, our traditions. Um, Maggie, I want to turn back to you, and I see you're in the process of moving, so I'll be gentle on you. Um, I want to turn back to you because, you know, Rand's description of the work that's taking place at Lewis Latimer, and her intentionality and the community that she's building strikes me as a moment to bring this question of how we encourage families, right? To take that first step of exploring the city and unknown spaces. And our early childhood educator leaders like yourself are so instrumental in that. And in some of our neighborhood-based work, we featured Brooklyn Museum, which is in many ways just a stone throw away, but for others, a world away. So if you could speak to, how you've structured your conversations to encourage exploration.
By the way, this is the first time I'm hearing you clearly in the entire thing. Technology. I'm so happy I heard that because I can speak a lot about that. Yes, in Crown Heights, you have a lot of gems. You have the Brooklyn Museum, the Brooklyn Children's Museum, you have the Botanical Gardens, you have the many, many other places that children love to visit. What we do in my center is that I take it upon myself, and my children help me to visit the places before we get the cool culture cards. And when we go, let's say, through the summer at the beginning of September, when the weather's still nice, the plants are still very radiant, and we make small videos, we take pictures, we incite families into the world of visiting, and we tell them, hey, if we get cool culture, you can come for free, or we draw up little plans on how to get there. In that neighborhood, it's not difficult. Just walk down at Washington Avenue and you're there. In Sunset Park, we tell them which buses run, which trains run. Sometimes if we have extra money in the budget, which doesn't happen very often, or I just pay for it. If any families say they would go, but they just don't have a Metro card, I facilitate transportation funds so that the children go and enjoy. We incite them by making those things available to them. The map, the funds, and guided tour, for example. When I go to the places, I take the map, and I take pictures, and we share it in our platform with them. And I say, hey, I went there, and on day one, I visited exhibit A, B, and C, and then we went out for a picnic in Prospect Park. And then the next time I went to see the Dior exhibit, and it was so much fun. So I give them a little story about how my day went in today's day and age, where everybody goes to TikTok and YouTube and Facebook, and they create like little stories. I wish all the teachers would join me in this venture, but at least I take it upon myself to be kind of like an influencer of culture.
And I really appreciate your nod towards storytelling, right? Which has been key for families, in particular, some Spanish-speaking families that you were encouraging to go see the Frida Kahlo exhibit.
Yes, that was amazing. They loved it. And more than anything, the little kids that went felt so represented. They felt so proud. So I was able to go before them, take pictures, make a little map, and say, hey, when you go to the museum, you just go make a left, make a right, and here's the exhibit, show your cool culture at the door, and go have fun. And then the children also help us tell the parents, because when we do circle time, we tell them, hey, over the weekend, I went to the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens and I saw butterflies and I saw whatever it is we're talking about, right? We include it in education, whatever they're learning about. And then they go home and they're like, Mommy, we have that card. Our teacher went to the Botanical Gardens and she saw butterflies. I want to see butterflies. we're going. They will go because there's nothing more persistent than a 3-year-old. They will make you go, and with them as accomplices in culture, we make it happen. And it makes me so happy when they send me pictures in my phone over the weekend, and they're like, "Hey, you were right. We got here, and it was awesome." And we also loved when during the pandemic, you were doing activities at the places, and you would do Zoom stuff, and then it got back in person, where all the families can just go for the family days in Cool Culture, and they would meet families from other centers, and it was a lot of fun.
I think there's nothing more gratifying than having a family return from a place like the Lewis Latimer House or the Brooklyn Museum with a story of what it's meant to them, for their family, a moment to
Absolutely.
sort of decompress, right? I know we likely have folks that have some questions, but I want to just ask you one last question before we turn it over for our Q&A session. And I'm thinking about where we are in terms of policy and budget and funding right now. As we think about the services and initiatives that support BIPOC families in the context of the current moment, we know that in the arts and cultural arena, we'll be fighting for an additional $40 million in arts funding that was available last year to the Department of Cultural Affairs. Wow. And that does not yet appear in the budget, and this is very much needed. We know in the early childhood education arena, there's currently an incredible amount of instability, which is, bad news for young children and families for whom the early childhood education system is a really important touchstone. We've seen reports of limited mental health supports for children, for folks who have lost, little ones that have lost a parent or primary caregiver. All of these things are a concern. And then lastly, I'll just say, in the philanthropic world, we've seen a bit of an opening and interest in BIPOC communities, which we hope will not be fleeting. But still, many small organizations of color, those that are most embedded in communities, in conversations with communities, do not have access to the funds that they need. So I would ask both of you, what, as you think about your role in community, your role with families, what would further your ability to offer the supports that you know are needed to be in collaboration with the communities you're working with?
In our world of preschool, it would be really good if our budget wasn't so restrictive, where we could add the paying for Cool Culture and paying for mental health professionals to come to our centers without affecting other areas of our budget. So right now, if we put those things in the budget, they'll probably say yes or no. At least it's an option. But they'll take the money away from instruction, which really we can. They'll take the money away from other things, and it shouldn't be an if this or that. It should be a get your cultural funds, get your mental health funds, and you still have your whole budget to decide or to make your program whole. I think that cutting this very vital thing for our communities, it just keeps us trapped in the race to upward mobility. It is a very big disadvantage to not have this access points, because other communities might do fundraising or might have a special donor or might have relationships that we people who are predominantly low income, not American, not savvy about how to navigate all these things, it might be almost nearly impossible for us to do it. And if we could get help from government agencies to just make it easier and provide us off the bat with the resources we need to provide this thing, to provide guaranteed cool culture. I'm advocating for that. I know it's not, right now like that, but I would like to live to the day where every child under 5 in the city of New York gets a cool culture card, because it would change their lives forever. And the same thing with mental health. When you grow up in an environment where mental health is important, it's discussed, it's not a shame, it's out in the open. If you're diabetic, you go to the doctor, you get insulin. Why is it a stigma to get help for mental health? It shouldn't be. If any other diseases are not, ailments are not a stigma, why is this part a stigma? And by teaching children how to self-regulate, how to self-love, how to self-care, we're creating a world where people have compassion and they know how to take care of themselves. And this is how we will stop school shootings, mall shootings, all kinds of violence that's unnecessary in society today. It starts with the little ones. Fund the little ones and everything else will follow.
Thank you, Maggie. And Ren, what's top of mind for you there? Maggie's pulled out a lot for us to chew on.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a ongoing theme in terms of equitable distribution of arts and culture funding and resources. The inequity between the less wealthy neighborhoods and the traditionally wealthy and privileged neighborhoods is still till today really great. And I think there has been some shift in that aspect, but there needs to be, I think, more priority in supporting organizations in the neighborhoods that need the resources the most, especially the institutions like Latimer House and many others who are operating within those communities and have been developing relationships historically for many years and are embedded in the neighborhoods we serve. And people like Maggie who are doing the great work, they need funding, but they also need this whole support system of cultural institutions, access to them right where they are. And I think for founders, I would advocate for more investment and focus in relationships as opposed to immediate outcomes, because we have the relationships and all we need is the investment to blossom. And those and that, I think the relationships we have will make the tangible outcomes more sustainable in the long term, as opposed to the big organization in Manhattan, they get some funding to do a program with an organization like Maggie's, and then after the funding of the program is done, and then the relationship was really can be very temporary and even transactional in some sense.
Yeah, I think you're speaking to the ongoing work that community-based organizations have been doing, right? Prior to the pandemic, prior to the racial reckoning that has brought this to the fore for a new cohort of culturals, and ensuring that the funding needed to build on the relationships that we may have already built is there, right? And to capitalize these organizations that are the go-to spaces for BIPOC communities and communities with less means. So I see that we have at least 1 or 2 questions in the chat or in the Q&A, if I can shift to that. And we have a question from Erica Apulado about how to support immigrant communities, in particular undocumented New Yorkers.
Well, in my center, we have seen an influx of people, families from all over coming. I mentioned Ukraine and Mexico before, but we get them from as far as Ecuador and Peru. People who literally walked over to America and are going through very dire straits. The way we support them is to provide them community information, health information. We guide them to the nearest clinic. We guide them to where their children can get vaccinated, where there's the food pantry, how to get food stamps, how to do all that. We also help them enroll in schools. One thing I noticed is that they're bringing them here and they're not providing health insurance. So to enroll in school, you need to get a medical. And a medical costs $100 per child. If you're a family with 3 kids and you have $0 on your name, barely have a coat, $300 might as well be $1 million. And I have taken out of my own pocket money to pay for medical so the children can enroll and their siblings, their older siblings that need to make it to grammar school and middle school. And it blows my mind to see that in a world where we are actually paying to bring them here, but we didn't have the forethought to provide this basic thing, the address to a clinic where children can get a medical. It's disastrous what's happening, but we try to do our best. I speak to other centers and they do pretty much the same. And we make sure the children enroll in the preschool as soon as possible. If there's any waivers, we extend the waivers. We don't have to wait a long time for them to join us and enjoy. And we give them the extra cool culture cards that we get in case they came too late, they couldn't apply, they don't have an email address, whatever the case might be, they can start enjoying their cultural pass as soon as they register.
Thank you so much, Maggie. And I see that somebody in our webinar community is suggesting that you reach out and she can have a representative assist with under CHP, Child Health Plan. So we'll
yeah, it takes. I am versed in that, and thank you. That's the next best thing. However, they require documentation, and it's not a next day situation where if you apply on the 16th of the month, it takes a month and a half to get insurance, where mommy needs to go get a job because they're going hungry. So they need something of immediate access. CHP, yeah, I help them apply for everything and anything I can get my hands on, but they need immediate, not long-term.
Fair enough, fair enough. And Ran, can I pass the mic over to you on that one?
Sure. This might not be early childhood specific, but we do offer many opportunities as a museum to immigrant communities and BIPOC artists and writers, including undocumented folks. At one of our programs, we offer a free memoir workshop for BIPOC writers on the theme of race and immigration, and we intentionally do not ask strict identifying information. We ask people to, identify themselves however they like, to kind of keep a balance between getting the core information, but with that also protecting their privacy and making sure the opportunities are available to undocumented folks as well.
Thank you so much for that. And we have one other question about the way culture partners, museums, and others can help support cool culture and cool culture families. And I think I would sort of go back to what we've heard from our panelists, both Ran and Maggie, about both making sure that the doors are open and welcoming when families come to the institution, but also there's a place related to collaboration. And I know that Ran and I have had this conversation in the past about really when collaborating with larger organizations, the need really to ensure that we have the appropriate compensation as we're reaching out to community members, because so often our staffing patterns are very thin. And I know this work is a labor of love for all of us, but the ability to bring in teaching artists and others and fairly compensate them in our collaborations is really critical. And with that comes resources. But Ran, and Maggie, I would invite you as well as partners in this work to respond to that.
I couldn't agree more. If you don't have people there to greet and teach and take over the work, then the families are going to just a shell. It takes people, it takes a village. So having a village that is well informed and well guided is the key to success. Hiring people in this current economy of post-COVID, where both people are evaluating their choices and have learned to advocate for themselves for good or bad sometimes, but let's be honest, it's becoming tricky to hire talent that is willing to go the extra mile, that is willing to stick out their neck, like we say. And that reflects in the program. But the only way they will stay is with money. I might do it for free. You might do it for free. Rent has to be paid. It's New York City. It's $5,000 a month for a 1-bedroom. So it has an impact. The well-funded places make well-funded decisions, have well-funded amenities, and that's the bottom line.
I don't have anything to add. I think Maggie, you hit it on the head.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I think our time is coming to a close, and we will be sharing some resources that folks can use as they think about supporting the mental health, physical health, spiritual well-being of families. We, as I mentioned before, created a set of toolkits along with our partners. And I also, as folks are looking for activities for families, want to give a shout out to an upcoming event at Lewis Latimer, which is taking place this Thursday. So Ran, will you speak to that? I encourage people to join.
Yes. So this Thursday, we have the next event in our longtime series called Illuminating Histories. This month, our theme is Black History Month and also Library Lovers Month. So each month we connect to a history theme. And then we're working with artist Tasha Duche, who designed the whole series to create light up arts and also other STEAM activities honoring those historical BIPOC figures and history themes. It's all free for families, so please sign up.
Thank you.
Great. So with that, I want to thank our panelists, Ran with Lewis Latimer House, Executive Director, Maggie Nunez, CEO and Director of Sunny Skies Preschool, and the fabulous School Culture team for making this event possible. To all of you for joining us, thank you so much.